Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I'm joined by Rick Ippolito, and I'm excited to dig into his story. He's got an interesting health event that occurred in his life that changed the trajectory of what he was working on, and found an interesting path to entrepreneurship that really embraces something that's been part of his family for a long time. And it's not the kind of business that we typically talk about. This is a food products business. So, Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, Rick, why don't you tell us the story of what you were doing before your health scare, what happened with that, and how that eventually led to you considering entrepreneurship as a path?
Okay, well, sure. So I won't go too far in the past. So around 1995, I started working for a pharmaceutical company. Went through the ranks, sales, management, account management, and so forth. And then in 2009, I was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, and made it a lot more difficult to walk, and some other issues were going on. And by 2012, I realized I just couldn't continue doing that anymore. So I ended up going on long-term disability in 2013, the toughest decision that I ever made to do that. But after I did that, I started to feel better because I wasn't under much stress. I was taking much better care of myself, eating better, exercising, and so forth. And reducing stress as it relates to multiple sclerosis specifically, but also autoimmune diseases. When you reduce your stress, you really can significantly reduce your symptoms. So that's what had happened. And I knew I wanted to go back to work, but my neurologist discouraged me from going back and doing what I was doing because the stress was high. And he said, if you do that, then your symptoms are going to come right back, and you'll be right back where you were before. And so it was actually my older brother who suggested that I make my grandma's, or I sell my tomato sauce, my grandmother's recipe tomato sauce. Now, he was accustomed to eating my sauce out of a jar because I'm the one who's continued our Italian traditions. I'm the one who does all the big family events with big Italian feasts for the holidays, and everybody comes over, and I make way too much food. I make a big giant pot of tomato sauce, and everybody goes home with lots of leftovers and a jar of tomato sauce. And then every time I would cook a big pot of sauce, I would always jar it up and I'd give it to my friends and family. So again, he was accustomed to eating my sauce out of a jar. So very nonchalantly, we were actually working on an engine together. And I remember he was cranking the wrench, and he goes, and I was telling him all the things that I was considering doing, going back to work. And he just very nonchalantly says, Rick, you ought to sell your tomato sauce. And that was in 2018. And I had never started a company before. I didn't know anything about food manufacturing. All I knew was, how to cook in the kitchen. And then it just took off from there. All he did was plant a seed, and then, I ran with it from that point on.
Interesting. So, stress was a major contributing factor to some of the health issues you had. And your brother thought,
Absolutely.
hey, instead of stressing yourself by going back into the corporate world, let's find a different kind of stress. Let's go start a business.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
2018, he plants this seed. What happens then? It's a long way, Rick, from, hey, maybe you should sell your tomato sauce to having a food products business. So walk us through some of the exploration that you did and what you
Yeah.
uncovered.
Well, I was very fortunate because I've got a fraternity brother who started a food company about a year before I did. He actually won America's Next Grill Star on the Kelly Ripa show or whatever that was. So all the
Oh, wow.
fraternity brothers, we were all, voting for him, and following along with it and everything. So after he won the contest, he started a food business based on one of the sauces that he used in the product that he or in the meal that he created and did the competition for. Um, so obviously, I called him up and I said, "Hey, buddy, tell me how you did this." And he kind of took me under his wing, and then we started doing things, together. It was perfect timing because he was about a year ahead of me, so he could make all the mistakes, and I would learn from his mistakes and avoid them. So that worked out pretty well, also. So he had a food manufacturer. He lives in Ocala, Florida, and he's got a food manufacturer that he was using. Just so happened that they were a very small manufacturer, Italian family owned, and he introduced me to them, and I worked with them, and we developed the recipe and so forth, um, and they started producing it in mid 2020 when they started producing early 2020. They started producing the sauce for me.
Good timing, Rick.
Yeah,
You nailed that one. So
yeah,
you have this idea for a business. You meet with your buddy, he gives you some advice. I'd love to get some more details on what kind of things he shared with you. Obviously, he connected you with a food manufacturer, so you didn't have to figure out how to manufacture the food, right? You could just work with them, give them your
right,
recipe, and figure out how to make it at scale. But what
right.
other pieces did he help you put together for you to be ready to have something functional to sell in 2020?
Well, he didn't really give me too much advice as far as the business goes. I did all that on my own.
Okay.
Um, and I also worked with I worked with the vocational rehab, state of Florida. Um, I think it's the Department of Education vocational rehab, and they assigned somebody to kind of help me out. And but I did a lot of research. I did a lot on my own. I've always been a self-starter, always been, somebody who, if I want to learn something, I'm going to dig in and I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to learn it. But I don't recall all my sources. I just remember just digging in and just finding out how do you start a business. There was lots of resources out there, I'm sure, on the internet and so forth. It was quite a long time ago. So it was
Could you
2019.
talk with us a little bit about what kind of support the state provided? That's an interesting place
Yeah.
to go for help, right?
So they actually assigned a mentor to me. Now, this is unusual for state of Florida, um, Division of Vocational Rehab. It was unusual for them to have somebody start a business.
Okay.
Um, and they did have someone that they assigned to me who was familiar with starting businesses, and we would meet, once a month. And he just kind of guided me through a business plan. I had already started a business plan. I went on, it was Live Plan. I got a subscription to Live Plan and walk you through that. And I taught myself how to write a business plan. So he was, I could bounce things off of him. And so they were very helpful. So
Yeah.
they contacted me,
Okay.
and they actually want to interview me as well and had me come speak at one of their meetings, how I started the business and what kind of help I got from them. But as I recall, a lot of the things that I learned from them, I had already learned on my own. I did, like I said, I did a lot of research, and I love to learn, so I just kind of figured it out.
So it sounds like you dug into some internet sources and a
Right.
business planning tool, Life Plan in this case, was
Hmm.
helpful for you, right? To force some of the questions that you needed to spend time researching and answering. Can
Oh
you
yeah.
can you think back to when you were working on your first business plan and highlight what were key things that came out when you were going through these questions in the business plan that really helped you formulate what you wanted to do with the business?
Well, early on, my thought process was I just wanted something to keep myself busy. I didn't need the money. I've never been the kind of person to sit around and just do nothing. So really, I just wanted to keep myself busy. I wasn't planning necessarily on turning this into a big company and doing much with it other than just, hey, it'd be kind of neat to to produce my grandmother's tomato sauce and see my name on a jar of tomato sauce in a grocery store. Well, wouldn't that be kind of neat? One of the things that really changed my trajectory was I went to a small business association luncheon in Jacksonville, Florida, and the keynote speaker was Maggie, cannot recall her last name, Maggie something. She created a product, a food product called Maggie Salsa. And I believe she was Mexican, but I believe she was from Arizona. And she made an all natural salsa. And it was called Maggie Salsa. And apparently she was pretty successful over on the West Coast. And after a few years, Campbell's approached her and offered to buy Maggie Salsa for $213 million.
Wow.
And I thought, I told my fraternity brother about that, and I said, I think this might be something a little more than just a hobby and just more than keeping myself busy. This could actually turn into something. So that really changed my mindset. And it was actually at that point that I started looking for funding, and then I found Guidant at that point. And fast forward quite a bit here. I'll mention that, Campbell's is a lot, they don't make just soup. They're a big food conglomerate. And your audience may be familiar with Rayo's tomato sauce. It's arguably the number one tomato sauce on the market. Well, they were privately owned, and early last year, they were approached by Campbell's, and Campbell's bought Rayo's tomato sauce for $2.7 billion. And I thought, goodness gracious, well, this is really I'm on the right track here. So it became a business that I do plan to sell one day.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what was pivotal there is it really helped open your eyes to doing something bigger, and that made you think about scale differently. Help us understand coming out of that seminar where Maggie was speaking, how your mindset shifted about the business and what that meant in terms of your business plan.
Well, originally, my business plan was very sketchy. We're talking, 2019. It was just, like I said, more like a hobby than anything else. Local stores that, I've lived in Tallahassee, Florida all my life, pretty much. And a lot of folks knew me there. My whole family had been there for years and years. So, people knew our name, and they knew that I knew how to cook. A lot of friends and family, lots of friends would come over, and I'd cook for them. So I was known for being a good cook and serving really good food, and I loved entertaining.
Right.
Originally, my plan was just to get in some local stores and just have some fun doing it. And I was in about 10 or 15 stores, and it started to grow a little bit. Now, um, early on in 2000, it was about a month before my first production run. And originally, my thought was I was going to sell it online mostly, do a lot of Facebook advertising, and take orders. I've got a few stores, but I'll take orders online and ship it. And so I decided to see what people thought about my sauce. And I bought a booth for $1,000 at the Sandestin Wine Festival in Sandestin, Florida.
Okay.
And I was the only private food booth there. There was a lot of restaurants there, lots of wine, you know, companies there. And all I did, I bought this booth, and I had a big sign made, and I had two crock pots, one with my regular marinara and one with a spicy marinara. Now, unbeknownst to me, that area, Sandestin and Destin, Florida, is a big vacation spot for folks from Louisiana. I had no idea. So most of the people that attended that wine festival were from Louisiana. And the line to taste my tomato sauce was longer than any other line at any of the restaurant booths or any of the wine booths. And I met a lot of people that day. I met folks, I met chefs, I met people that own grocery stores, lots of people. And this older woman had walked up to me and said, "My name's Diane. And I own a small chain of grocery stores in New Orleans. If you ever make it over to Louisiana, call me. I'd love to put your product in my stores. I said,
Wow.
okay. Well, that was Louisiana. And I was producing in Florida, so there's no way I could do anything in Louisiana. So, so I just kind of, I took her name down. I, wrote it onto my business card and I stuck it in my wallet. And so, like I said, then I start. When I did that, when I did the wine festival, I took pre-orders for. I said, I'm going to be producing the sauce next month. I'll take pre-orders, and I got a lot of pre-orders. So I
What's a
started shipping.
lot of pre-orders, Rick?
Pardon me?
What's a lot of pre-orders for a wine
A
festival?
lot of pre-orders. I probably had 50 orders.
Awesome. That had
And
to
that
feel
was,
pretty,
anywhere from, two, three, four, five, 6 jars of tomato sauce.
that had
Um,
feel like pretty good validation for the
yeah.
marketability of it.
Well, the validation I got was from a lot of the people that they, like I said, they were from Louisiana and they love Louisianans love spicy. And I wasn't going to make a spicy. We never made a spicy tomato sauce growing up, but it was my fraternity brother who happens to be Cuban and he loves spicy food. And he asked me one day, "You going to make a spicy tomato sauce?" I said, "Spicy? I'm not going to make a spicy tomato sauce." Well, he convinced me to go ahead and do that. So I did it. And then unbeknownst to me, everyone at the wine festival loved the spicy tomato sauce. And I had several chefs that had come up to me and they were giving me advice on how spicy it should be and this and that. One of the things that they said was, it's good, it tastes great, but it's not spicy enough. And he
Hmm.
said, granted, we're from Louisiana, we like things that are spicy. He said, but think about this. He said, if it's not spicy enough, they've got nowhere to go. If it's too spicy, they can always back down to your regular marinara, or you can sell 2 jars and they can mix them together. I said, okay. So I kicked it up a little bit, as the Louisianans say. I kicked it up a little bit, made it a little bit spicier, and that worked out great. Um, so there was several stores in Tallahassee that took my product on, and I was doing a lot of shipping and boxing. And when you ship a jar of tomato sauce, it's glass
Yeah.
and you really have to protect it. So I would spend my days my kitchen and my dining room became my shipping department. And bubble wrapping the jars and trying to figure out what's the best way to pack these jars so they don't break. I had a lot of breakage issues, initially. And I got to a point where I said, this is I've got better things to do with my days than to be packing up tomato sauce and shipping it all over the place. So I decided just to focus on grocery stores. And around that time, COVID hit, and that pretty much shut everything down. And for me specifically, what happened was, I import my tomatoes from Italy. And if you recall, when COVID first hit, Italy was the first country that got hit really hard.
Yep.
So I wasn't able to get the Italian tomatoes that I would normally use. So I had to switch Italian brands to whatever was in the warehouses here in the United States. Well, every tomato manufacturer, they pack their tomatoes differently. Some add salt, some add citric acid, some don't. Some pack them in a heavier puree or a lighter puree. It's different. And you really, if you change tomato brand, you've got to adjust your recipe. And that was one of the greatest challenges I had with the manufacturer that was making it for me in Ocala, was they weren't willing to make those adjustments for me.
Yeah.
Even though I switched the tomatoes, it was a thinner, because I like my tomato sauce. It's pretty thick and chunky, and they weren't willing to make those adjustments or it just made it a little more difficult to do that. So we ended up parting ways, and I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. And I met someone. So I was single at the time, and I met someone on a dating app from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and she happened to work for the tourism department for Baton Rouge. And I told her about my situation, told her about my company and everything I was doing, and I still had a few sales here and there, but not too much was really going on. But because I had a pretty decent inventory left over from what I was producing down in Ocala. And she introduced me to Louisiana State University's College of Agriculture. They have an incubator program. It's called the Food Innovation Institute at LSU. And so she introduced me to them. I met with them. And, when you get it, in the College of Agriculture, you can get a degree in food manufacturing, farming, food science, and anything to do with food and agriculture. And they actually built a very high-tech food manufacturing facility on campus, and they lease it out to new companies that are starting a business. And they've got lots of resources. They have three food scientists on staff. They've got connections with everyone in the food industry throughout the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
And Louisiana is known for food. So I met so many people there, and they helped me out a lot more than anyone else. That's where I got most of my help in learning how to grow this business and operate the business. What was different, though, was um, instead of me hiring a manufacturer to do everything for me, the manufacturer does everything. They deal with the FDA, they get the approvals, they do the inspections, they do everything. When I'm at LSU, I'm the manufacturer. So I transitioned from just being the company that hires someone to do it for me. I became the manufacturer. I dealt directly with the FDA. I dealt directly with, the all the inspectors and everything. And I got to know all the Florida FDA inspectors, the Louisiana FDA inspectors, the federal FDA inspectors, and they were all very, very helpful. It was a long process. And in October of 2023, I received all my approvals. And that's when I started making it at LSU. And when I started making it at LSU, I had moved since then. I moved from Tallahassee down to the beach at Rosemary Beach in North Florida. And so I was picking up some stores here along the panhandle of Florida. And one day I was driving through Panama City Beach, stopping at a couple of stores, and I thought, wait a minute. I remember meeting Diane, who owns a chain of grocery stores in New Orleans, and I'm producing in Louisiana now. So I pulled out my wallet and I found her number. And I just decided to give her a call. So I called and got no answer. And I called, I don't know how many times. I called for a couple of months, and I kept leaving messages and never answered. So one day I was same thing, driving down the road, and I put her contact in my phone. So I'm driving down the road, just left another store. I think I went to Fresh Market. I just left Fresh Market. And I said, "Hey Siri, call Diane Bro." And she answered the phone. And I reminded her who I was, and she said, "I remember you. You've got that great tomato sauce that I went to the wine festival in Sandesa." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I'm making it at LSU now, right up the road from me in Baton Rouge." And she said, "I want to put you in my store." I said, "Wonderful." She goes, "Well, when do you plan on coming over here next?" And I wasn't planning on it. And I said,
On
"Well,
the
I
way.
can be there. I can be there next week." So within a week, I was in. She got five stores, like good, nice, called Bromart, and she put me in all the stores, and sales were going really well. Just with they're big grocery stores, and I was accustomed to little mom and pop shops and things like that, and just the sales were not great, but all of a sudden it got really busy. Now, again, I've got multiple sclerosis. I use a mobility scooter. I use a walker. But I was the manufacturer. So I was, when I'm manufacturing, I'm operating all the machinery. I hired students to help me. And I had to train them how to use them. I was trained how to use the machinery. Then I had to train them how to use the machinery and how to prepare it, how to clean it, how to, and it's very technical. Um, and when I say technical, I'll back up a little bit because when you produce a food product, it's not a recipe, it's a formula. And you everything has to be weighed in grams. and you have to know at what temperature you cook it, how long do you cook it at that temperature. And there's a lot of requirements from the FDA. The products has to be a certain temperature when you put it in the jar, and a lot of measurements, a lot of recording. It's very technical. So I have to teach that to the students too, as they're, and it's good for them because they get hands-on experience in a food manufacturing facility. So it really works out well
Yeah.
for everybody. And so my volume started to go up considerably with these 5 grocery stores. And then I picked up a few more grocery stores in the New Orleans area. And I got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I was standing when we would produce, I'm standing for 10 hours. Um, and then I would personally load the cases of tomato sauce, and each jar of tomato sauce weighs 2.5 pounds.
Yeah.
And
It's
a case of 12 is 35 pounds.
okay.
So I'm picking these up. I'm loading them on a pallet. I'm loading them on my truck. I'm loading them back in the warehouse, and I'm delivering them to the store. And when I deliver them to a store, I've got my truck all loaded up, and I'll get a few cases, and I'll put them on the deck of my mobility scooter, and I'll ride my scooter into the store, and I deliver the tomato sauce. And I was like, wow, this is just this. It's fun. I absolutely love the sales aspect of it. I love the interaction with the people, and talking about my food and telling them about my family and the history and all that stuff. And but it got to be a lot. So I found a manufacturer in right outside of Baton Rouge, another Italian family that make tomato sauce. And so they took me on, and they started producing for me in 2024. And simultaneously, I had contacted a distributor based out of New Orleans, who I had contacted before because I was trying to find another source for my tomatoes from Italy. So I had been working with them just sourcing ingredients. And so they took me on as well. So simultaneously, I had delegated the two most labor intensive parts of the business was production and distribution.
Yeah.
And that that made all the difference. And my distributor distributes, it's a small distributor in southern Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And they've got about 230 grocery stores. And so I'm in about 65 stores in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And the largest grocery store chain in Louisiana is called Rouse's Markets. It's a privately owned grocery store chain, and they've got 65 or 67 stores, most of them in Louisiana. They've branched out to Alabama and Mississippi and Alabama as well. And they contacted me in December, just this past December,
Yeah.
and said they want to put my sauce in their stores. So this year, I'll be transitioning from 65 stores to about 130.
Wow. How does that
Yeah.
impact volume that you have to produce, oversee, have distributed through your distributor?
Well, what the nice thing is now that I've got a manufacturer, I just oversee them. I've trained them how to make it, and they do a wonderful job. And I have perfected that formula. It's so simple to produce now, and it literally smells and tastes exactly like my grandmother's tomato sauce. When I crack open a jar of the sauce, it smells like grandma's house on Sunday. And I'm amazed that I was actually able to exactly replicate what I produce at home. When I cook it at home, you're talking, when Italians cook tomato sauce, we simmer it for 6, 8 hours.
Wow.
Um, and you can't do that in manufacturing. Time is money, and it would if I had to cook it for that long, it would probably be a $50 jar of tomato sauce. Well, no one's going to buy that. So I found the perfect formula using different types of Italian tomatoes, and it only takes about an hour to produce it, and it's amazing. It really turned out better than I anticipated it would.
So does that mean for family gatherings, you no longer make it from scratch? You just open up some jars of Ippolito and
Pretty
put it
much.
down?
Pretty much. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Rick,
It turned out that good.
it's fascinating that the big connection that you got was from a dating app. You may be the
Yeah.
first business owner I've ever talked to who shared that key strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. God was in charge. I give all the glory to God. I dedicated the company early on to him, and this is more of a ministry than it is a business. I'll give you a little information about my logo and the connection there.
Okay.
So, in the center of my logo is a white horse, and it represents two things. So I wish I had a jar in front of me. I could show you the jar, but so I've got an Italian ribbon. The product is called Ippolito's Naturally Italian Marinara, and there's an Italian flag ribbon, and in the center and the white part is a white horse, and that white horse represents my name. The name Ippolito means fleeing horses, and that was derived from a Greek play, a Greek tragic play that was written in 728 BC by a playwright by the name of Euripides. And the name of the play is called Hippolytus. Now, Hippolytus is a Greek name, but translated into Italian is Ippolito. So if you're in Italy and you hear this play, you go to see this play in Italy, you're going to hear the name Ippolito. You're not going to hear Hippolytus. And so I'll give you a very brief story of Ippolito or Hippolytus. So Ippolito was a righteous man. He loved nature and he loved horses. And white horses righteousness is depicted by white horses, right? The knight in shining armor, he's always on a white horse, right? So it depicts righteousness. So Ippolito is always depicted with white horses. So if anyone is familiar with Greek mythology, the goddess of love, Aphrodite, Aphrodite sees this good-looking dude in the forest and says, "Ooh, I can seduce him." Well, being righteous, Ippolito rejected her. Well, that made her mad. So she told mommy and daddy. I'll skip there's a lot involved with the mommy. Her name was Phaedra. But daddy was Poseidon. Poseidon's the god of water, or the god of the sea. So to get back at Ippolito, to punish him for rejecting his daughter, he had some big sea creature come out of the sea, startled Ippolito's horses, and they reared up and they started to flee. Again, fleeing horses is what Ippolito means. So they started to flee, and Ippolito got tangled up in the reins, and they drug him to his death. So that's the story of Ippolito, and that's where my name Ippolito was derived from. Now, my grandfather, on my father's side, his name was Arcangelo Ippolito. He was born in Sicily, so I'm half Italian, half Sicilian. My mother's side of the family is the Italian side from southern Italy, and then my father's side is from a very small village in the center of the island of Sicily called Resitano in Caltanissetta. And my grandfather died the year I was born in 64, so I never knew him. But I found out that he had a tattoo of a horse on his shoulder, and no one ever knew why. And I believe I figured out why he had a tattoo of a horse on his shoulder. And the second reason is as I mentioned, I dedicated the company to God. So originally, and my fraternity brother, who won the America's Next Grill Star, he also is Christian. So we talk a lot about, our business is dedicated to God, and we do it for the glory of God. And originally, my horse originally was a red horse. And I got that from a friend of mine in Italy who produces tomato products. And she uses San Marzano tomatoes. So if anyone's familiar with tomatoes and tomato sauce, San Marzanos are the best tomatoes to use for tomato sauce. And they grow them in a very select region right outside of the city of Naples in southern Italy. And it's actually in the foothills of Mount Vesuvius, and they grow them in that volcanic earth, and it makes for a very thick, meaty, very little water, um, very deep red tomato. And there's also very few seeds in them. So because of the thickness and the meatiness of the tomato, and the fact there's very few seeds in them, it makes for the best tomatoes to make tomato sauce. And any Italian that makes their own tomato sauce, they use San Marzano tomatoes.
Right.
Originally, my plan was just to get in some local stores. My friend, her logo for her tomato products was a red outline of a San Marzano tomato. It's a very unique shape of a tomato, nothing like we have over here. They're elongated, sort of like a Roma tomato, but they're shaped sort of like a pear. It's very unique. So she had an outline in red of a San Marzano tomato against a black background. And I thought, wow, that looks really great. I love the red on the black. So I decided to go with a red horse against the black background. And when I switched to LSU, I was redesigning my label. And at the time, we were studying the book of Revelation at church. And we were talking about the second coming of Jesus. And he is arriving. And when he comes back, he's going to be riding on a white horse. And the verse originally, I'll back up. The verse that I was using, actually on my jar, that demonstrated that I dedicated all the success of the company to God was, I can't remember the what it. I know it's a proverb, but it's a proverb, and it says, "As you prepare your horse for battle, the victory belongs to the Lord." And I thought, okay, well, going to market, your competition, that's like going to battle, but all the success that I have, the victory belongs to God. Um, but then, as I said, we were studying the book of Revelation. And that's when I found out about, I learned more about Hippolytus and the white horse. And every picture I saw of him was, he was depicted with white horses. So I'd already started thinking about switching it to a white horse. Well, I ran across Revelation 19:11 that talks about the second coming. And that's when the Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was exiled on the island of Patmos, and he had visions from God, from Jesus, about the end of the world, what's going to come. And the part where Jesus returns is Revelation 19:11 that says, "And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat upon him was faithful and true, and he comes in righteousness to judge and wage war." And so I said, that's perfect. That's the verse I need to put on my jar. And so I tell everyone that story, and it gives me an opportunity to share the gospel with them. And I can ask them, when that happens, where are you going to be? The reason I ask that is a few verses after that, where it describes Jesus coming on a white horse, a few verses after that, it talks about Jesus's armies that's coming with him. Well, the armies are all the saints and all the believers that are his armies coming down to wage war on all the evil on earth, and they're all riding white horses as well. So I can ask people, well, where are you going to be? Are you going to be on a white horse, or are you going to be down here? Who do you think's going to win that war? So it really opens up some wonderful conversations. And like I said, this has really turned into a ministry more than a business. And when I did that, it really just started to take off.
Meaning when you put in the storytelling components of who you are and how it connected to your family and your beliefs, that was really when it started to go. Is it
That's when calls started coming in. That's when everything became easy. Like I didn't have to work at it. Things were just happening.
so have you been doing all of the sales directly? So you're the one having the conversations with these various buyers for the grocery stores, the owners of the grocery stores? Got it.
I
So
do it all.
the
I'm a
distribution
one-man show.
yeah, the distribution partner has taken you away from having to deliver it on the carts, but you're still the one who has to secure the deal and then hand it to them and say, okay, now here's our distribution cycle. We're going to go with these guys.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
walk us through what the future looks like, Rick. Like, obviously you're looking to double down on the number of stores you're in, and that
Yep.
might happen here pretty quickly. And then what?
Yep. So my plan is, I'm only in a few stores in North Florida right now. Now, I mentioned my fraternity brother friend. He's in Ocala, and he's got a product that's on the Florida local section of all the Publix grocery stores. Anyone in Florida is familiar with Publix, privately owned, very large grocery store chain, and I don't think I wasn't ready for Publix yet. But this year, I most likely will be. I want to get all the Rouse's markets under my belt first, and then move into that Florida market, the Florida local section. So the Florida local section in the Publix grocery stores is an end cap, and all Florida products. That's where they're located. And the fact that I'm a resident of Florida, I meet that criteria, even though I don't make it in Florida.
So,
But
so you said you didn't know that you were ready for Publix yet. What does it take to be ready to take on a big partner like that you're going to be distributing through?
Well, I have to learn through Rouse's markets first what it's like to have my product in a very large grocery store chain that's got 60 something stores.
Okay.
So I'll be learning that this year as all their stores start to come on board. Um, and my distributor will make that will simplify that, and I don't think it's going to be too difficult as far as just getting, the manufacturing side of it and the distribution side of it. That's already seamless. Um, it's really the sales and marketing. And I've got a 20-year marketing background, so that's simple for me. But what I have found is that when people taste my tomato sauce, they buy it. 90% of them buy it when they taste it. So demonstrations in grocery stores is vital to the success of my company.
Yeah.
I can advertise all I want. I did a lot of advertising on Facebook, but it doesn't stick in their mind until they put it in their mouth. And I've hired salespeople that are they go into the grocery stores. I've trained them to go into the grocery stores. We set up a table, got a nice big sign, we got crock pots, and they can taste the sauce. And initially, when I was doing that, I wanted to communicate to the customers, how healthy the product is. Now, my oldest daughter, is my she's my health consultant, and she had convinced me to take the sugar out of my tomato sauce because the Sicilians always put a little bit of sugar to make it a little bit sweet. But one day she said, "Dad, I can't eat your tomato sauce." So why not? She said, "I don't eat sugar." So well, there's only a little bit. It's less than 1 gram of sugar. She goes, "I don't eat any sugar." So I took the sugar out, and right about that time is when I switched my tomato brand, or the tomato product that I was using in the sauce. I actually went back to the original tomatoes I started to consider way back in 2019, and I decided against them originally because they were very expensive, and they're San Marzano tomatoes. They're very expensive. And I said, I go back to them. I'm going to try it. I tried it, and when I did taste testing, the new tomatoes without sugar in them, people thought that one had sugar in it, and the one that had a little sugar, they thought that one didn't. So it's a little bit sweeter tomato with less acid, and it worked out perfect. Um, so my product it's got no added sugar. It's keto friendly. It's got a lower sodium. It's all natural ingredients. Even the citric acid that's in it is naturally derived citric acid. There's nothing artificial in there. I also learned about the counterfeit Italian olive oil market. It's huge. Most of the Italian olive oils that people buy in the grocery store, it's not Italian olive oil. It's got vegetable oil mixed in it. It's got all kinds of
Oh,
other seed oils mixed with it, and they claim that so there's a lot of counterfeit out there. So I had about 6 months ago, I switched over to a certified Italian extra virgin olive oil. So everything in this product is the most premium ingredients, and it's one of the healthiest ones on the market. So I was training my sales reps to really push that. How healthy it is. It's only 9 grams of carbs because there's no added sugar. So it's keto friendly. It's gluten free. Got lower sodium, no added sugar. And they were spending so much time talking about those aspects of the sauce that they were not putting as much, they were not getting as many people to taste it when
okay.
they're in the grocery store. So I changed the strategy to talk less about that and just put that sauce in as many people's mouths as possible. And I call the strategy sauce on tongues. I said, when you're in the store, if you miss one person, you probably missed the sale because most of the time when they put it in their mouth, they pick up a jar and they buy it. One, two, three jars, they'll pick it up and buy it. I even have, so in New Orleans, the largest ethnic population in New Orleans is Italian, and a
Really?
large part of them are Sicilian. I never knew that. 7% of the population in New Orleans are Italian, and a lot of them are Sicilian. So typically, when I do a demo in a grocery store in New Orleans, the managers will tell me, we're not going to sell much of this sauce because they're all Italian. They make their own tomato sauce. And they buy the San Marzano tomatoes in the can and they make their own. I said, I know. So when Italians walk by my booth when I'm there, right? They walk by and they snub me almost every time. They'll put their nose up and walk by. And I'm like, excuse me, you want to try my grandma's tomato sauce? And they'll look at me, and this has happened countless times. They'll look at me and they'll say, I make my own. Or they'll say, I'm Sicilian, I make my own. I'm Italian, I make my own. And I said, I know. So am I. And I make my own. And this is my grandma's recipe. So I asked them, since you're Italian or Sicilian and you make your own, I would really value your opinion. Will you taste it? Tell me what you think. And I've got so many Italians that buy my tomato sauce. And when they taste it, they go, wow, this tastes like mine. I've got on video an Italian woman who makes her own tomato sauce. And I said, what do you think? And she goes, it's better. I said, better than what? She said, it's better than mine.
That's a lot for an
So,
Italian woman to admit, Rick.
pardon me?
That's a lot for an Italian woman to admit.
Yes, it is. And that happens often. Um, so in the future, if I do advertising on television or whatever, I will have Italians saying that. And I'm telling you, it blew my mind. And the Italians and the managers that are in the grocery stores in New Orleans, it blows their mind too. Italians are buying my. They'll say, "Well, when I don't feel like spending all day cooking it, I'll just buy yours because it's as good as mine, or it's as good as my grandma's."
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Rick, give us an idea of where you're at volume wise with 65 stores and what you're sort of expecting in terms of as this year shakes out.
Yep. So volume wise, it's still fairly low because it really depends on the demos that I do. When I do demos, it sells like crazy.
Yep.
And so I'm just getting to the point where those residual sales are coming through after the demos.
Yep.
And I had to retrain all the reps because the reps were out there and they would do a demo and they would sell maybe 12 or 15 jars. And when I change the strategy, when I do the demos, I sell 50 to 60 jars of tomato sauce in a 3 hour period. And so I'm in the process of training them and getting more sales reps to just get anyone to come to that table and put that sauce in their mouth.
Yep.
And so now my volume is probably around 40 to 50 cases a month
Okay.
in those stores, and it's starting to pick up. The last couple of months, I kind of backed off with my reps because I got some reps that just can't get people to the table like I do. So I'm kind of going through a sales transition and retraining some new reps and stuff like that. So kind of slowed down a little bit. And I really want to get a good sales team together for when Rouse's Markets starts putting my sauce in the stores because that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah. Once you can get people
Yeah.
to try your brand. Well,
Yep.
I really appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit about your story. It's clear that you are very passionate about this and that you have built all the pieces of who you are into it, right? In a way
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really authentic. And I'm confident that when you get the chance to tell your story and have people taste your sauce, I can see why they want to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Oh, one other thing I was going to mention about my future plan. So Publix was one of them. Um, and the other one is I'm working with a manufacturer that can put my sauce in plastic pouches. There's no tomato sauce that's in a plastic pouch. And when you sell on Amazon, you can't sell glass. It's going to break.
Yeah, too heavy.
And these plastic pouches, it's just new technology from South Korea. They're non-toxic. even at a hot fill, they're non-toxic. There's 4 or 5 major plastic toxins, and these bags have zero toxins in them. And I think that's going to go over really well with Amazon. So I'm in talks. We've already done a couple of testing with this manufacturer that has this. They just bought a $13 million piece of equipment from South Korea to make these. And that's going pretty well. Hopefully, sometime this year, we'll launch that and we'll get on Amazon. And once we're on Amazon, Amazon owns um, Whole Foods. So we'll get in Whole Foods too. And maybe I'll offer glass and plastic pouches in Amazon and also in Whole Foods. So
Right on.
that's our plan for 2025.
Fantastic. Well, Rick, thanks again for the time. Really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and we'll have to check in with you here in a year or two and see how things are going.
Sounds great.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.